This episode is about minutes 31 through 35 of Solo, a Star Wars Story, featuring friend of the show, music theorist, and film musicologist Frank Lehman.
How you doing?
Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, you can call me Xanthi, and today is all about minutes 31 through 35 of Solo, a Star Wars Story. We are finally getting into the train heist. Welcome back to the show, Frank.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm excited about this segment of the film.
I am too, and it's actually really neat how the 5-minute segments exactly kind of cut off at exactly the right place. So we start right at the beginning of this. It's like,
I know, it's uncanny. And the place where it stops too is like there's just 1 second's worth of the next cue.
Yeah.
It's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. It was like a perfect ending to our discussion last week, where just the cue ended at just the right place. So yeah, it's nice when it's not just awkwardly in the middle. So yeah, we are kicking off this very interesting scene, and there's a lot musically happening here that's very interesting and possibly kind of new for Star Wars. Before we get into the minutia, I guess, minute by minute, what stands out to you on a big picture level in these minutes musically?
Big picture, I think there are 3 things that really stand out to me. First is the sheer density of this cue and the amount of changes that take place over the course of the whole train heist, which is more or less uninterrupted scoring. And it's probably actually several smaller cues that have been sort of stitched together, but nevertheless, it's really packed. Even for this score and the style that Powell writes in, it's super eventful music. So that's one thing. The second thing is, to my ears, the really fascinating and dramatic usage of, I guess, a percussion, like a driving percussion track that I suspect was recorded separately from the rest of the orchestra, particularly over the beginning of the cue. And then lastly, and maybe most striking, is the Enfys Nest material that comes to the fore in a big way halfway through. So I'm especially excited to talk about that material.
That definitely is a standout in the whole soundtrack, in the whole score. Mm-hmm. And you're not the only person who has a really big fascination with that part. I think when I tweeted something about it on Solo, I think Dan Golding also from Art of the Score cited that immediately as his favorite part.
Oh,
yeah.
He's a man after my own cloth.
He'll be on later this season.
Yay.
So a question about the density part, because I find that interesting. I also find this is definitely a very dense cue. And I'm curious how you think it compares to the density of something like the Trench Run in A New Hope, because that's also very dense, possibly in a different way.
Yeah, I think it's quite comparable. I went through and just for fun tracked the number of key changes that occur over this span. And it's something like roughly 21, 22 different tonal centers, which over the course of 5 minutes is almost 15 seconds is all you get on average per key before moving somewhere else. And that's actually really quite similar to Williams' approach of this sort of hyperkinetic, tonally mobile style of scoring where keys aren't there to sort of house themes, but rather just to be they're sort of produced by modulations. The modulation comes first and then the key is secondary. And I think that I really hear that in this cue too, because all of the most exciting moments are prepared by dramatic key changes or are left with dramatic key changes.
So do you mean when you say can you say more about the modulation part?
Yeah. So maybe I should back up. A lot of action scoring, especially in modern sort of contemporary scoring practice, is based on ostinati and repetitive, sort of stable but highly energetic patterns, like action strings and motifs that are reiterated a lot to generate intensity and anxiety. And while Powell is definitely capable of that, and there are a few scores of his where I think it's the kind of quintessential minimalistic, really grounded and stable action scoring. This isn't so much it. It really is all over the place. And that harkens back to an older style, which I think Williams's work on the original trilogy, which again, all those action cues are constantly moving around, and they're not so much structured around ostinati and single keys, but rather movement and changing things mid-thought. Like it's really more responsive to the action and whatever's happening on screen. So modulation, I find, is a super effective tool to generate that same feeling of intensity that you might get from like thickening orchestration or adding like literally faster tempos and quicker rhythmic values. And here, like that energy comes from the fact that you don't get a key center for more than, on average, 15 seconds before moving off somewhere else.
So by modulation, you're really talking about like the transitional space, like the space transitioning from one key to another, rather than having the instant key change or something
it's
like
kind
that.
of both.
Both.
I mean, they're instances of the latter, where you kind of have this more amorphous section that dissolves the tonality of the previous theme or motif, and maybe in some ways prepares your arrival at the next one. Particularly when you're not dealing with clear statements of themes like the Han Solo theme or the Beckett and crew theme, like those more interstitial areas tend to be a little bit more tonally amorphous, and you get that really process-based or inherently unstable kind of modulation. But there are just as many instances of like that, taking a key and just shifting it after a musical idea is done. Like right at the beginning of the sequence, you get the Beckett and the crew theme in G minor, and then it pops itself down by a third to E minor, and there's no pivot chord, there's no sort of preparation of that modulation, and then it dwells there for a little bit, and then it yoinks itself back upwards to G, and then starts alternating with D flat. So a lot of the sort of modulatory work here is really efficient. It's like the bare minimum of time spent to get from key to key.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good setup to start listening, I guess. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay. I'm starting it out cold right at the beginning of the 31st minute. So that's the Beckett. That's the gang theme, yeah?
No, 9.6 to the bridge. Let's find out how good we really are, folks.
And then the key, Beckett in a different key. Mm-hmm. That little thing in the background that we just heard. That's like a very Williams like orchestration nod, it seems. I like it.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, Powell, he studied the scores. He must have, because it's not just a sequence, of course, but the whole solo soundtrack is filled with these little micro orchestrational details that really do sound like Williams's unique fingerprints, but with a Powell filter. It's not exactly what Williams would do.
I know what you mean, and something that I've really appreciated about like the interviews that Powell gives is they get really specific, depending on who's interviewing him. But like, I feel like he offers a lot of insight into his process and his headspace that I don't always hear with other composer interviews. I don't know why that is, but something about like, I tend to not I get kind of sick of like hearing composer interviews sometimes because I would rather hear more reviews. Like I kind of think like art criticism is like I don't think it's like dying. I think it's just not as supported as it should be because the I don't know, era of celebrity and hearing directly from the artist is all great. But like I wish there were more like perspectives outside of that. Rather than it feeling like a press tour, just having interviews. But John Powell's interviews have been really, really awesome for me to hear. And I've heard a lot of them at this point. And he talks a lot about his process working with John Williams. Like John Williams spotted this with him, did the spotting sessions with him, and which is like wild. And the stories of him like going to John Williams's house and just like hearing him play the themes and like talking about the themes with him, being like, "Can I keep all of them?"
And he's funny too.
He's so funny. He's so dry and like self-deprecating.
Dry and forthcoming too about some of the awkwardness and the pressure and the feeling.
I appreciate that.
Just being upfront about his anxiety about filling the shoes of John Williams. I mean, I think he did a remarkably good job. This score is, I think one of the highlights of the Disney era Star Wars sort of musical corpus. I love this score, and I think he knocked it out of the park. And it is refreshing to hear the degree of honesty about his process and specificity. So one thing I found extremely helpful is that he gives labels to his motifs in these interviews. Like, so often, with other thematic inventories, is sort of left to speculate what was exactly meant by this little passing motivic gesture or another. But Powell's like, yep, this is Han's hero theme. This is searching. This is secrets. This is Beckett's gang. This is Kira. This is and like for the entire motivic fabric, he has sort of a Powell sanctioned label system that this definitive. It was very helpful for me.
Yeah, and he seems very clear on where both he and John Williams stand in regard to their peers. And hearing him speak about that from like the composer perspective in such like a blunt way, it kind of like, it really, I don't know, it opened my eyes a little bit, or it was, I don't know, like helpful to hear certain things like specifically called out, specifically like, him talking about like Elgar and like bringing up specific references that he was making and that he knows like John Williams is making, and trying to bridge those gaps and throw in little things here and there. And he specifically has talked about things that he wishes were different on the soundtrack. And
but that comes from a place of really deep knowledge and appreciation and love. I mean, Powell is of the generation of film composers that learned about the art from Williams, I think, primarily, and may well have been inspired to pursue it because of these super prominent scores. So when you get to know something that well, I mean, you are able to articulate both its pros and cons and what you would do differently. And, it is really quite refreshing to see him open up about the process in that way.
Yeah. And so with regard to this scene, he is particularly proud of this cue. As he should be. And he definitely loves like the Enfys, like all the Enfys Nest stuff. Although I'm pretty sure I've heard him in an interview say offhandedly, not making a big deal out of it, but that he wishes that in the final mix, the music were louder. He thinks the music should have been louder here. Which I agree.
Well, he's being very John Williams-esque there, isn't he? Because Williams has, over the past few years, become much more vocal about his displeasure of having his music drowned out during action scenes. And I mean, it's such a wild and intricate and complex cue. And I mean, we're paying attention to it on a specific musical level, and we're listening to the soundtrack in isolation too. But the average filmgoer obviously is not going to be able to pick out most of the stuff besides, the driving percussion and maybe some of the brassy, loud fanfares and Enfys Nest material when that pops in is a little bit more foregrounded in the mix. But yeah, I get his annoyance. It's something I suppose you just have to accept as a composer for big budget action movies. But
yeah,
it's still frustrating, right? The most complicated and often musically interesting music gets written for action scenes and fight scenes and chase scenes, which are the most likely to be drowned out by a super sort of excitable and prominent and loud sound effects track. So what do you do?
Yeah, and the sound
Right?
effects
Boring
are
music, I guess. I don't know.
right. Yeah, that's very interesting. Would you consider this train heist a set piece theme, like a set piece or
Uh,
whatever?
I don't think so. Actually, I think almost all of the. I mean, I would consider it, overall as a big, musical set piece in the same way that like the mine heist is or the Kessel Run is. But thematically speaking, I think the vast majority of stuff here is based on leitmotifs. So there aren't like themes that are unique to this sequence. It's pretty thematically saturated.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And so the distinction would be like a set piece theme would be more relegated to the action that it takes place in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even that is fuzzy because,
Yeah.
well, to give you an example, I mean, this is sort of intruding upon another 5-minute set from much later in the movie, but during the Kessel Run, the asteroid theme or the asteroid field theme from Empire Strikes Back is revived. And before that, it never occurred anywhere besides the Empire Strikes Back in that very limited context. But because now it is being reused and developed in a certain way, I actually sort of promoted it to, I don't know if I call it set piece, but incidental motif, because it is now recurring and has some, sort of longer range significance and development. So things that were initially conceived of as just being totally restricted to one scene, like a one theme wonder kind of motif. The more, the more Disney keeps on coming up with properties that involve and reuse and develop old music, the more likely that nothing's going to be a set piece anymore. It's all recurrent.
I find it interesting what the like newer composers latch onto in terms of the old material, because like you said, sometimes it's just something you never would have expected to show up so much later on. Like I think in Rebels specifically, like this whole thing becomes so much more than it ever was. And so it, like now going back and listening to A New Hope, I mean, it's like, it's higher. I think it has like a new meaning, or like it has even more symbolism for me in a different way. And I also think of in Solo specifically, John Powell uses the main theme more than I would have expected.
Much more. Yeah. To the point where it really is not Luke Skywalker's theme anymore.
Yeah.
It was arguably it never really was, but
argue.
I mean,
that's arguable. Dan Golding would disagree with you.
Well, in A New Hope, okay, but even there, it's kind of an all-purpose theme too. But it definitely, like when you get to the prequels, it's in its few usages, it's pretty detached from a particular character. But here, I mean, not just as the theme used recurrently, but in a very prominent way. Like, so we're not dealing with little Easter eggs where we're sneaking the theme in, kind of like the
Imperial
Rogue One model, or the Imperial March. But yeah, you get the main theme in big, bold, really expansive statements. It's as interesting, and I think it's a great choice. I actually am super on board with like a big choral reveal of the Millennium Falcon with the music of Star Wars main title, given that for the first time, I think, vocal rendition. It may rub some people who are like purists the wrong way, but yeah.
The first time it really stands out to me is in the Corellia Chase, when it just kind of inserts almost like randomly. I mean, it's unexpected.
Yeah. And there it has that very bright, heroic, brassy guise, which is like quite New Hope-y, right? Some of the more swashbuckling stuff from A New Hope. But Powell doesn't just leave it at that level. I mean, he really gives the theme a workout over the course of the movie.
I really like how it transitions out of that. Corellia Chase, I find that's like probably one of my favorites. I think that, which is funny because I think that's like, from what I read, that's one of the most, it's one of the most criticized tracks.
Really?
But I think I don't know. I for some reason I like it. I think I like the string writing in it, so maybe that's
Oh yeah,
that's why.
it's great. I love it. It's so propulsive, and the string writing is exciting, and it's not that kind of generic
Exactly.
action strings that we're a little bit too used to, especially that vein of string writing that's conjoined with drum loops
Yeah.
in Corellia Chase, and I think it's because
He's a
Powell
violinist.
had that Williams theme model and the associated harmonies, so it's probably 50-50 Powell and Williams, at least melodically speaking. But the unique Powell stuff in the Corellia Chase is just awesome. There's some like chromatic sequences that go on there. I think the balance of like percussive versus string versus brass writing is fantastic. It's just a really well conceived, very gripping cue, and people who don't like it, they got to get over their resistance to like having rock drum kit type accompanying tracks in Star Wars. Like,
Well,
it's not worth it.
well, yeah. Well, put it this way, like if that they're in for a world of disappointment if that's going to be a major sticking point going forward. But with Corellia Chase, I was reading this just last night, like, and it wasn't just like one comment; it was like threads in multiple posts on certain message boards of comparing it to RCP, like basically thinking it's like a Zimmer track. It feeling like it's a very like Hans Zimmer style track. And of course, John Powell used to work with Remote Control Productions, Hans Zimmer. But the thing is, if I think about it from a certain point of view, I guess I can see that because it kind of is swashbuckling. If I think about like Pirates, or I think of some of Zimmer's more like catchy action tunes, I don't know, maybe, but because of the violin writing specifically and other orchestration things, but I just pay attention to the violins, that really doesn't feel like that's where I disagree because of that. Like something about it feels more alive.
Yeah, I'm totally on the same page. I think Powell's string writing is remarkably busy and interesting and harmonically quite intricate. That's also true of this cue.
Yes.
And, maybe there, I mean, I get the RCP comparison. I think that if there's an element of Zimmer or the larger Zimmer aesthetic, is maybe a little bit earlier Zimmer, like
exactly
Pirates or before, like late 90s, early 2000s. Pre-Interstellar, like just super minimalistic action scoring where there are chained together melodies, and yes, you have this sort of active drum loop based sort of percussion obbligato happening constantly, but it is also changing, and the music is very flexibly related to what's happening on the screen, right? It's very responsive, and thematic units are sort of timed in a way that are really satisfying too. That's another thing I think is probably why I like the Corellia Chase so much, is that you get like, just uninterrupted, really rousing statements of the Han solo theme.
Yes.
Right? Just presented to you with perfect clarity, but it works.
Totally.
Just absolutely works with the cutting and editing of the scene too. It's just really well done.
I love that track so much. I mean, that's also what I chose to do, like, because every season I like do a new cover of something from that soundtrack. And that's what I chose to do for this one. So listeners, you'll hear that beginning and end. That's based on Corellia Chase.
I have a copy, maybe you do too, of the piano album, like the piano arrangements of various solo tracks. Really well done, and Corellia Chase is one of them. I don't have it on hand, but
like it's recordings.
No, I mean like this kind of thing, but for
like sheet music.
Yeah, sheet music. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, album in that sense.
Okay.
And you don't usually see really kinetic and fast-paced action cues getting the piano arrangement treatment, especially for something that is, I don't think, particularly pianistic in idiom, which but
Is it pretty good?
It's pretty good. It's beyond my abilities to do convincingly. Like I can do the slower stuff, like the Kira Lando closet stuff, and maybe a bit of the Adventures of Han, concert work. But that also has some very, very, very unpianistic components, especially in the sort of
the end of that
parts.
Adventures of Han. I love the ending of the Adventures of Han suite. I think it's
Oh
it's
yeah,
hard.
I heard this is one of the high points of my sort of Star Wars research done, but I heard Williams in rehearsal with the Boston Pops doing the Adventures of Han before a concert. I guess it was 2018. Is that when the movie came out?
Yeah.
So this is for the May Boston Pops Film Night concert with Williams conducting, and I had a student actually who was very in with the sort of Pops, Friends of the Boston Pops organization, who's able to get me seats to a rehearsal with Williams conducting. And I was just blown away because nobody in the audience had ever heard this piece. I guess unless you were in the studio orchestra in LA or were on John Powell's computer.
The film hadn't come out yet?
No, it hadn't come out yet. So I got this sneak preview of the piece, and the part that Williams had to rehearse a little bit more than most was the central sort of racing octatonic.
Very Kabalevsky.
Yeah. And then all the all three trumpets are doing in unison, and it was just mind blowing. I wonder
that part.
what could this? Yeah, it was really a treat to get that sort of not just a preview of the piece, but also to see Williams as a conductor sort of realizing it in front of my ears was so cool. So cool.
Oh, that is really cool. Okay, wait. I just want to play a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I love that. I like the textures in this a lot. Yeah. And I think Corellia Chase uses some similar types of textures John Williams does this a lot too, where it's like really the higher instruments might be doing octatonic, whatever, thingies, like in the Battle of Yavin too, that type of stuff. And then the brass will be like a little bit having I don't know how to say this, a slower the melody. Something slower.
Yeah, it's classic. It's classic Williams action writing, and it's so cool to see Powell put his spin on it, and it comes across, I think, especially well in the Corellia Chase. Yeah.
So the train heist strikes me as more despite all the key changes, at least at the beginning, I feel like it's more drum loopy, probably more steady in the drum loopy department.
Yeah.
And I feel that the track a couple tracks before, Flying with Chewie, I feel like gets that way too in the soaring part. Very.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. I haven't looked at the actual BPM for various portions of the cue. It feels, at least during the first minute or so, like we have a very rigidly maintained pace. Bumped, 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 bump, 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 ba-da-dum, dumped, 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 throughout, making a quite consistent sort of through line up until the point that the stormtroopers appear, in which case I think there may be a slight tempo change there. There's definitely a textural and a thematic change, but yeah, I get that feeling of consistency too, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, wait. Then some interesting things start to happen. So let's continue listening. Oh, it got slow all of a sudden. Okay, wait. I think I went too far.
That's the preamble, I think.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Oh, wait. Let me fast forward. Okay.
Never better.
Now, this is interesting.
That's a great little moment right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little surprising. And
yeah. It's very Powell. It's just a sort of, the strings are moving in parallel with a kind of octatonic or tritonally oriented chromatic melody, and it gives this nice little sort of lush, but very alien sounding sound. You get it too. You haven't talked about this cue yet, but you actually get it in like the chicken in the pot.
I was just gonna say it like foreshadows chicken in the pot. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, he loves it. It's not a Star Wars sound actually. Like the strings, high strings, working through the sort of parallel voice leading or planing, but Powell makes it work really convincingly, and I think it's because of both the texture and the harmony. That there's that chromatic minor third and tritone oriented sort of harmonization of the tune at that point.
And I can't help but notice that both of them are on violin.
Yeah. I think it's when the coaxium is discussed or revealed like that.
Okay. I think you're probably right. Okay. So listeners, the parallel or planing motion, it refers to like, say you have a melody, say you have like, basically you have a line moving at the same time in two different voices or instruments, but they're moving by like the same space. Okay, it's like, how do I put this? It's like you keep your if you're playing on the piano, you can like, if you were to play two notes but keep your same exact hand shape, but just like move your hand all over the key. Yeah, explain it better, please.
Here, my fingers are not going to change their like the width between them.
Yes.
Right? They're moving in lockstep. And the thing with Star Wars is that Williams uses that kind of texture a lot, but mostly for the brass and woodwinds. So like the Rebel fanfare is always, always in that sort of planing. Instruments are locked in their relationship with one another. Here, it actually requires 3 fingers now. All right, it's always the same shape with your hand. But something that Powell adds to the mix is this parallel planing for upper strings, which is a
because he's a
novel sound in Star Wars.
violinist. I mean, I don't know if it's because, but
well, it's wonderful. And like, it's probably one of those details that you deplore not actually hearing or hearing well in the film mix, because it's the kind of thing that would get drowned out, sort of more subtle harmonization or voicings, but it's there to appreciate on the soundtrack.
Yes, and something that makes it the effect of having it on strings instead of brass and in the way, and I'll play it again, is there are obviously different instruments bring different, I don't know, unique like things that they can do that other instruments can't, or different timbral qualities or something. And so something that violins are very good at, depending on the notes you're using, and it doesn't always work for all of the notes, but is sliding into notes, sliding up to things. And if you have, 2 separate violin sections, each playing a different line, you can slide kind of at the same time. So it's like you're sliding. I'll play it. It's a really cool effect that is uniquely easy to do on the violin. Put it that way. Okay. Listen here. Okay, there wasn't that much actually sliding in that example, but there are examples other places, and also in Chicken in the Pot when we get there. There's definitely that's big string sliding. Even
without the like literal glissandi or portamento, whatever you want to call it, it's still this kind of slipperiness that you get because of the chromatic relationships and how everything is still if one note moves, the note below it is moving exactly the same increments. It feels like a body that's slipping upwards and downwards. It's really uncanny. And yeah, I hear this in other cues in this score, like Chicken in the Pot, and I think Powell, it's a Powellism. I think I've heard it in like the How to Train Your Dragon scores on occasion too. Maybe not in exactly the same way or in the same action music context, but yeah, high string writing where so it's like very divided. The first violins are maybe in multiple parts, and then everything below it, violin 2, violas, or just the next chord tone below, moving always to catch the sort of minor third related harmony above a slippery, sort of unreal or uncanny kind of melody. Yeah, when I hear that, I think Powell, and maybe I don't have the biggest sample size, but it still strikes me as it's not Williams. That's one thing I can say for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. It kind of reminds me of like maybe some of other Heist. I mean, this cue kind of reminds me of other types of Heist cues as well, of Powell's. I think there's something really interesting about learning about composers and what instruments they are most comfortable with, or what instruments they grew up playing, if any, you know, because I sincerely like feel like I hear the effects of that in their writing, in the things that they focus on. And like, well, Williams just has like a uniquely amazing like background in being really great at a lot of stuff, like in playing piano, and having a lot of experience both playing in orchestras and being able to like orchestrate cues from a young age. And then someone like Powell, who grew up playing, he was a violinist, and his I think father was a violinist too, right?
Yeah, it's like his native instrument, or the one that feels most comfortable to write for, and which is not to say that writing for other instruments in this score is somehow unidiomatic.
Of course. But there's like a special, and I say this as a composer violinist myself, there's like a special, and when I was talking to Samantha Tripp, so thank you for making us meet. It's been awesome to have her on the podcast. So, but something that I was talking to Samantha about on one of our episodes was, she's a big fan of Desplat, because like she likes his flute writing. And that was something, you know, he, of course, like that's his instrument, but of course, like that he can write, you know, not just for flute, but there's something like, she finds that there's something like special about like the way that he uses flute. And I feel that way about Johnny Greenwood with the strings as well.
Oh yeah. And there are those chances that a composer sometimes gets where they can write a score that really plays to their unique, preferred, sort of personally facile, like the instrument that you're most at ease with, like the Joker score by Hildur Guðnadóttir is like, it's a cello score, and you can hear just how remarkably inventive that is. And I don't think it would be possible. I don't want to rule anything out, but I don't think that it would be the same had a composer who was not a cellist attempted to come up with that kind of musical characterization. So, yeah, I'm all for film composers writing for their main instruments.
Yeah, me too.
And sometimes that instrument is like just a sequencer too, which is also
exactly, which is like, yeah, 100%. And I think that's when people like Göransson or even like Hans Zimmer shine, is when they are like really leaning into what they're like. Hans Zimmer is native in like he's really, really good at playing like the computer.
Yeah.
The DAW,
better
like,
than the bass or the keyboards.
Right.
Right. And like, well, does Göransson, does he play the recorder?
I think he does.
I don't know if that's his main instrument, but it's clearly a personal strength of his.
Yeah.
That writing there. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like, it's nice to hear like composers have their own little unique mannerisms and things that come out, especially like when so many things sometimes sound the same. So anyway, it's a nice little John Powell thing. Okay, so let's continue listening.
Yes. Enough to power a fleet, or blow us all straight to hell. All right, talk to me.
So quick tempo change.
It's a great day. Best day of your life, my grabby friend.
So what theme is this? Is that a theme? That is a theme.
Yeah. That's the
gang.
The crew, the gang theme, Beckett's theme. It's kind of played there in diminution, like much quicker than usual.
Yeah.
I think it's like characteristic statement would be da 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 da. And in this cue, I mean, it's kind of the most prominent and most recurring thematic element of the train heist. I mean, we get the first version, which is in G minor, and it kind of has this plodding and Phrygian quality to it. That kind of threatening flattened second, which is not normally present in the theme, or what we just heard. Right, much speedier, sort of giving way to a bunch of little trumpet fanfares, because I think they're succeeding at this point. Briefly, their little plan seems to be going off without a hitch. So you get an upbeat and positive and Phrygian free kind of statement of the theme, but things go awry pretty quickly, right? It doesn't go off smoothly.
Yeah, so I guess in the Phrygian version, the flattened 2 kind of represents more. I don't know, something more ominous or something. I don't know if ominous is the right word, but less promising. So this quicker pace and that's interesting. So okay, diminution. So diminution just means like when it's like the same theme, but just the whole thing is condensed into a smaller time frame, as opposed to
condensed,
like
maybe ornamented to So like, cramming in more information than normal into a smaller span of time.
Yeah. Do you find that there are a lot of examples of that in this score?
I mean, it's a thematically very thick score. So I bet there are instances of diminuted, especially augmented or augmentated versions, like that main theme, and
oh yeah, that's true. The main theme for sure.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind, actually, I don't know if this is different really in terms of tempo or sort of note density, but the last statement of Beckett / the gang's theme is, when he has been shot. Yeah, and it's like this high, maybe string harmonics or just like very naked sounding dissonant strings playing it. And I think it's actually stretched out longer than normal to sort of match his dying words to Han.
Okay,
but so Powell, he does every thematic,
every trick in the
transformational trick in the book. Yeah, it's here somewhere. Yeah. Another reason why I like this score so much, right? He doesn't just have themes that appear once or twice and disappear. Like everything that's part of his thematic inventory here is really well developed. It makes for a very satisfying standalone score.
Yes. So, listeners, just like for reference, when we're talking about how the main theme is stretched out in many instances, which would be an example of augmentation, the same theme taking up a longer time frame. Like the theme would be like do 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 do, but we do hear it a lot like do 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 do, or, with in more complex textures. One that I'm curious about, though, since we just passed it the past couple weeks. Han and Chewie, I can't think off the top of my head. Does that ever get faster? Because that's such an easygoing, like laid back theme. You know what I'm talking about? Or is it like always so laid back? I don't know. I'm putting you on the spot.
In the reminiscence therapy, like towards the end, before they go into the big black hole maw thing, there's some Han and Chewie leitmotif that is much more perky and quick than it was elsewhere. But,
okay, cool. I will listen for that.
Right.
All right. So what were we talking about? Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, we were just passing the gang.
The stormtroopers are coming.
Yes. Fun. Okay. Yes, let's listen on.
Here they come! Get down to the couplers! Real fall back! Well, that didn't take them long.
So much sound design. Oh my god. There it is. Okay, I wish we could hear that better, but Imperials.
I love it. So one of the nicest things I think about these, the two existing Star Wars anthology films, is that both of them revived the sort of runt of the leitmotivic litter, the original Imperial / Stormtrooper / Vader theme from A New Hope,
Yes.
which Williams never used afterwards. And it plays a big role, although in a constrained way, in Rogue One. And it's only, I think, in this one cue from
I think so.
Solo. But it's played with. The harmonic language is like Williams to a T. You have this kind of marching semitonal bass pattern, which is, two augmented triads, a half step apart from each other, just, goose stepping away. And then
now,
on
is
top
that
of
planar motion as well? Is that?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then the theme comes in too, which I think is like in parallel sixths. So I can't
that really struck
the
me.
Trill. Yeah. So it's I don't like using polytonal because I'm not sure whether we can actually hear in more than one key at the same time. But it's written with
interesting,
very fuzzy and sort of multiple tonal areas at once, kind of harmonization, which again, it's like this is how Williams approached a lot of the Imperial music, especially in episode 4. We have like these sort of dissonant bass notes or dissonant bass pedal chords against a theme that may be in a totally foreign harmonic universe, and that's exactly what's happening here, and it works like gangbusters. I think it's better than almost any of the Stormtrooper theme or Imperial theme iterations from A New Hope, if I could be.
It's
so
one
bold.
of the it's a totally unique one, but still feeling, like you said, very like Williams-esque. The instrument.
Yeah.
Do we ever hear it on those instruments in A New Hope?
I think it sounds like trumpets plus flutes and oboes or something here. I don't know exactly what
maybe it's the
combo
context
is.
or something. Something about like the context. Something about it feels like very fresh.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, I think, a thudding drum of some sort, giving a pump, 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 against like a quarter note pace, which I don't think Williams really. None of the major themes in A New Hope are given like a drum backing.
Okay, let's listen to it in the. Does it come? Have we passed it? Wait.
Nope, I think it's on its way.
So this is what's going on behind the track. I'm listening to the track called Train Heist.
All right, here comes the
drums. Okay, here. Great string writing. You're right. The rhythm. I think the drums are what.
Yeah,
because
like
it puts
toms,
the emphasis.
maybe?
It puts the emphasis on like. It makes the meter feel. Something about the meter feels really cool.
Yeah, it's really effective. And I mean, it really leans into that quite dissonant aspect of the theme, which like Giacchino, when he did Rogue One, he didn't quite try to recapture the harmonic like disjunction of the Imperial theme on the one or two occasions where it occurs, but like even here, and the fact that you're getting the theme in parallel 6, so like what is it? It's this sort of F sharp at the bottom and F on the top. This nice little cross relation, which is being foregrounded in the way that Powell is voicing and sort of, again, writing in parallel.
Which is very Trench Run.
Yeah, it's very Trench Run. It's very, we're back in 1977, plus a drum, like a crucial drum component, which would not have been heard so much back then.
I think the fact that the like the rhythmic element comes in before that that Imperial motif moment where it's like, I don't know, quarter notes, just kind of a steady drum beat, and then continues on after it. It makes the entrance of the Imperials motif feel like much more than just a needle drop. It feels
Yeah.
like incorporated. Maybe that's something. Yeah, I just really like the way that it's incorporated.
Yeah, it's with it. It's well motivated. It's set up. It has a kind of arc to it in a very small
it doesn't feel like
space.
just it's sampled or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. We have
And
to hear that.
and I think it's in part because of that build-up is also, really well informed by the Star Wars harmonic and rhythmic idiom in its own right. So, it's setting up this what could have been just a sort of winking Easter egg of a theme actually becomes essential to the drama of this cue, right? It's the way that anxiety and tension is built over the course of the train heist, I think would be vastly different if you were to excise that little vamp that occurs before the stormtrooper music, right? And so this is, it's a sign of really, I think, thoughtful and well done action writing, where it's not strictly about hitting all the beats, but actually creating this longer arc that can still hit the beats, but nevertheless sort of guide you from where you're supposed to be at a high point of excitement and maybe a lull to a sense of desperation. And it's all, it's really communicated quite effectively and with a great deal of skill.
Let's listen to that one more time. Oh, wait, I have to go for more back. And then I'm going to ask you what you think of it in the context of the movie. Yeah. Oh, it's good. I forgot how it changes a note at the end too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's playing with it. And it sort of recedes in importance. I think there's one or two other micro statements within this cue, but this chase scene is not so much about the Imperial threat. It's more about Enfys Nest and then the droids that show up at the very conclusion of our segment.
Right. So that's why it's, I don't want to say I don't think it's controversial. I just think some people have stated like confusion and like dislike of it, like liking it, but also being like, it's not related.
Musically speaking? Or?
Yeah. Like I was listening to Sideshow Sound Radio's, they do like score guides for like podcast episodes for various movies. And they, I guess they kind of go through the tracks and give their opinions on stuff. And so they were saying that they really like how it shows up here, but it bothers them a little bit that there's no Darth Vader, as they said, like it's no relationship to Darth Vader, which to me, that doesn't bother me, but yeah. I can, yeah.
Right. And again, I think this has to do with the tone and the era chronologically within the sort of Star Wars saga that this movie is attempting to slot into. I mean, this is closer to New Hope era than it is not to the prequels or certainly to the sequels. So, I mean, that the association with Darth Vader and the Imperial March isn't a given at this point. It certainly wasn't in A New Hope. And there's zero reason for Han Solo and his buddies to have Vader on their mind at all. The fact that as audiences, we've come to associate Vader so strongly with the Imperial March, despite the fact that he had this sort of also ran motif back in A New Hope, I think actually it would be more confusing for us to get the classic at this point, right? That it would draw attention to itself and maybe give a perception of threat that wasn't what the filmmakers are going for here, right? The stormtroopers, it's an incidental problem that is going to give way to a much more profound one as, two characters die, not because of the stormtroopers, because of Enfys Nest and the sort of the heist gone wrong. So yeah, save the Imperial March for a different cue.
Well, I think they also wouldn't have liked the Imperial March. I think what they were saying was, first of all, they associated the Imperials motif with Vader, which I personally don't. I actually don't even really associate the Imperial March with Vader. I think it's more Imperials, separate from Vader. But also, I just believe Vader is Anakin inside. So, but but that Imperials motif in particular, like that doesn't scream Vader to me. That screams Imperials, stormtroopers, Imperial stuff. So they were saying that like either way, like Imperials or Vader, whom they associate with that theme, wasn't part of it, or Imperials in general. But first of all, I disagree. And I know we've had this conversation before. You cited some paper or someone's research. I can't remember who it is, but about when there are incongruities that we were talking. Okay, it's coming back to. We were talking about Rise of Skywalker. We were talking about the Lando Janna moment, and when that theme pops up, and I think I was saying that I never feel like I know enough about the movie at the time to know whether it's appropriate or not. It just the incongruity kind of like opens up a new questions for me. And you cited some paper or something,
right? I don't know if it would have been like markedness theory. This is sort of an idea from linguistics and semiotics that's been applied to music analysis, where there's some kind of asymmetry in expectations versus what's realized, and that tends to be the moments that absorb or make themselves available for meaning making the most.
I think that was it.
Potently, and it's also it occurs to me that Carolyn Abate's work
that's who
on opera.
Who it was.
Oh, it was Abate. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's a similar idea, right? That where there's some sort of disjunction, that the music fails or does something really generically unexpected, where those tend to be the most narratively rich moments, because they require a kind of interpretation on our part. Now, I don't personally feel like there's much in the way of expectation violation here. Other than the fact that I guess I never expected to hear the Imperials theme again before Rogue One and Rogue One and Solo, so it was nice, right? It was a pleasant, but like dramatically, I think it all makes perfect sense. It's very natural, and it's also, like we were saying, it's accomplished in a really convincing way musically with that setup, with the previous sort of fluid tonal section that seems like things may suddenly go awry. So I approve.
I approve too. You know, although I feel like I feel like people go into score analysis, if you want to call it that, with just different values that guide that in general. But something about the like musical coherence of it makes it come off to me like something that John Powell is trying to say with it, even if it's not an association I would have made. For example, if I were scoring this, God forbid, I hope to never score a Star Wars motion picture. It's the pressure. But using Luke's theme, using the main theme at that point in Corellia Chase, when Han kind of like zooms past, kind of has a heroic moment, I wouldn't have done that. But because I feel like it was so coherently done, it made me like sit there and make sense of it, and in my own way. And I came to like an understanding that it doesn't matter if that was his intention or not, but it like made me take it seriously. It made me think like, okay, so I associate this theme with Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker's not in this movie. That's fine. But what is happening here that might line up with something that I remember it happening with Luke Skywalker? And for me, how I understand that is like, even though Han is not like a Force person, he doesn't care about that. The Force, you know, it affects everyone, but he doesn't, he's a denier. So that it's not that it's not that, but it definitely felt like a Han closing his eyes and crossing his fingers and being like, this is going to work. Okay. Let's just like a leap of faith moment. And that is what like connected it to me.
Working through him. Yeah. It's now, did Powell think through it in exactly the same way?
Probably not.
But that's the nice thing about these sort of standout, slightly atypical or unexpected moments, is that they invite you to come up with your own associations or to draw connections in a way that often the creators could not have envisioned, but they put it on the table, right? And that's
Right.
and that's a sort of the mythic aspect of these scores, and it only becomes more pronounced the more music and the more years worth of soundtracks you have to refer to. It's just a really rich site for mythological meaning making and associations.
Right. So Powell was coming to this score with his own like framework, like his own understanding of how he would use themes. And I think like even though I wouldn't have made a lot of the same choices, I feel like he is consistent within himself in his perspective, if that makes sense. So like in this Imperials part, even though I don't see Imperials, but like I also don't think themes need to like just match up with what I can see as a listener. Like it makes me think, if anything, the music hints at something I might not know yet, or something like that. Which later we find out, even though Enfys Nest this is more related to Enfys Nest, like Enfys Nest is related to the rebellion, and so in a way, you can tease out relationship. Like these people don't want to be involved in the rebellion, and they think that they're not. They think that they're separate from it, but no one is. Not the rebellion, the empire. It's no one can really escape it. Like So
I love it. I think that's some high level soundtrack hermeneutics there, but that's kind of the stuff that I live for. So
yeah, same. That's what we're here for. So let's continue listening.
Yeah.
All right. 1, 2.
All right. Little close there, buddy. On. What's the hold up?
The gang.
All right, together.
That's the Imperials again. Han, heroic.
They got one uncoupled. Where are you, buddy?
That little button ending.
Up here planning my retirement. Thinking about opening a cantina somewhere warm, but not too warm, you know? Lowering the winch cables now.
It's kind of impressive how he keeps spinning out the yang so long.
Yeah. And here it's like the rare major or even Lydian variant.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Yeah, here we go.
Beckett, he's coming.
Damn it. Never gonna hear the end of this.
Okay. Let's pause. All right.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's not the first time that we are hearing Enfys Nest, actually. But it is the first time with voices. Is that correct?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Because we do hear it foreshadowed when they're at the campfire talking about Enfys Nest, and Han's like, "What's an Enfys Nest?" And they're not really explaining it, but you can kind of hear it just in instruments in the background.
Yeah, it's very underplayed there. Completely the opposite at this point. I mean, it's like one of the most, I think, musically salient moments in the score. It pops in a way that even like the crew theme or the Han and Kira theme doesn't, in part because it is a relatively new timbre and approach, sonic approach in the series. So it just, jumps out at you in high relief in relationship to all the other expectations and musical styles that we get in Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be fair to say that it's borrowing from a different musical language entirely.
Yeah, well, and literal language. I have not been able to ascertain what the Bulgarian women's choir is actually singing in terms of the text here. It may be nonsense. It may be Huttese. It may be Sanskrit. I don't know. I don't think it's Bulgarian. It doesn't sound that way to me, but I would be curious if anywhere you were able to locate like an interview with Powell, what he said, because I couldn't find out.
It's a good question. I don't actually know. But I'm curious too. I do know that like it's probably not Sanskrit, just judging from like I know his process with Chicken in the Pot, having to redo that, or because the lyrics the story group was like actually you can't do it in that language.
Yeah.
So you have to do it in like they're a little more strict about that now about the language.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So what's happening here is in the like Bulgarian, it's in a Bulgarian folk style. You have two different Enfys Nest themes written down in your catalog. And does Powell distinguish between these two variants or these two versions?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, they're usually heard in conjunction with one another, but there are cases where it's just the one or the other. Like I think in that introduction at the campfire, it's just Enfys Nest one, and that there may be some statements like on Savarine, where it's dominated by Enfys Nest 2, and they're quite dissimilar, like not timbrally necessarily, because both of them involve like the women's
style
chorus.
of singing, yeah.
But like harmonically, like the first one is, based on this little 4-note figure, and sort of given a little detail above and below. And for those listeners who are really sensitive to scales and like orderings of whole and half steps, it's whole step, half step is octatonic. Like what could be a more Star Wars scale? But it's actually like the melodic production and the way that these little motifs are conveyed by the singers that is so strikingly unusual for Star Wars.
Yes.
The vocal technique, the vocal timbre, the writing of the vocal parts, the way that one line sort of stays on a pedal while the other moves above and below it, sometimes creating these seconds, like nice gnarly dissonances, which, based on my very last minute and informal read about Bulgarian traditional music, is actually it's fairly in keeping with that style, where singing was an absolutely essential part of Bulgarian traditional music. And as a kind of agrarian society, I learned this is so interesting that instruments, like physical instruments, were mostly restricted to men because they were out being shepherds, and apparently they had their hands free to play, guitars or shawms or duduks or whatever they had. Whereas women were, in domestic spaces and literally always had their hands full doing stuff at the home. So their music was always vocal. And there's like a set of really distinctive Bulgarian singing traditions and idioms that, I doubt that Powell is like an ethnomusicologist here or is really trying to evoke with a great deal of specificity Bulgaria, but it is at play, right? There is a kind of element of that folk style here that is really fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. There's so much to get in. There's so much to get into because this is such an interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, since this has come up in several episodes, and various people, can you define octatonic in layman's terms?
There are a couple ways. Yeah. I don't know if everything that I say is in layman's terms, I guess. So you could think of it as a scale, right? This is a scale that you get by alternating half step and whole step intervals. So instead of like the normal major scale, which would be, which is a 7-note scale, you could get an octatonic scale by sort of changing the pattern of relationships between notes that are one step apart. Should have my theorist card revoked there for botching the first attempt at the octatonic scale.
But there's not just one octatonic scale.
No. There's many
permutations.
There are many permutations. Yeah, there are a couple different forms of it. There's the form that could start on a whole tone or the form that could start on a half step. And there are also like rotations. But the thing with this scale, because it has so much internal symmetry, is that you can't transpose it very much before arriving at the same assortment of pitch classes. So there are only three like truly unique octatonic scales related by minor third relationships. That's kind of the privileged relationship. So another way of thinking of this, and I think this is the way that like jazz musicians and especially jazz arrangers and pianists think of this collection, is as a fusion of two fully diminished chords. So this is basically stacking minor thirds on top of it themselves. Take one of those and then you plop on another.
Yeah.
And then you sort of take into account both at the same time. And this is the way a lot of like 19th century theorists thought of it too, is the diminished scale or the doubly diminished scale. And then my favorite way of conceiving of it, so I've given a scale-based explanation, a sort of double diminished based explanation, and then there's a chord progression-based explanation, which is when you have chromatic medians that are related by minor thirds. So like C major, E flat major, F sharp major, A major. You take those 4 chords that are all related by third, and you can join them, and you get. And voila, another octatonic scale emerges. So there are lots of ways of arriving at it, but the sound is always the same. It's sort of this really dissonant, slightly exotic sounding set of notes that Hollywood has, recruited over and over and over again since the very beginning. Like there's some composers that it's also especially associated with, like Stravinsky and the Russians. So I don't know exactly what Powell's harmonics point of reference is here. I almost feel like there's a bit of Vaughan Williams, oddly. Some of like the harsher Vaughan Williams, like the 4th and 6th symphonies. But it has quite a pedigree, this scale, and it's all over Star Wars, especially in A New Hope. And here we're finding it like in a super prominent way in Solo, which is, closely connected to A New Hope.
I tend to associate it with xylophone.
A xylophone scale. Yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking of...
It's got that, it's like that harsh, brittle, dissonant sound. It seems like, xylophone would be a good way of conveying.
It's in Battle of Crate too. I'm sorry. Yeah, in The Last Jedi.
Oh, yeah. No, wait.
It's on violin.
I'm getting my octatonic configurations all...
No, that's Adventures of Han.
Yeah, I know.
Wow. Yep, that's what it is.
It's hard to find an action sequence that doesn't have it in some way or another, because it's
interesting how that happens.
Works. It just works.
Yeah.
But anyway,
so okay.
The first Enfys Nest theme has a little octatonic tetrachord, like a 4-note figure as its main melodic component. But now I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you feel like this theme is major or minor?
Neither. I feel like...
Right, that's like the frame, but then with...
Right.
You could hear it like that, you could hear it like that. Like, which gets priority?
If I like absolutely had to pick in a Western context, I would say minor. But I actually have studied a lot of Bulgarian music.
Oh my gosh.
And I have done Greek folk music and dance my whole life. And there are a lot of similarities, especially in the region of like Thrace. And if we get into like Macedonian music too, there's a lot of sort of crossover. And I have sung in this style like competitively. It's really hard. It hurts your voice.
Wow.
And so a lot of this is super familiar to me. And it is... I'm gonna. I told my last guest this, but I haven't had the like guts to reach out to her yet. But like my like Balkan music teacher that I had in grad school, I kind of want to invite her on the podcast to like talk about this. But I'm kind of always scared to talk to teachers. So, if you were my teacher, I probably would be too scared to have you on the show. But
that just makes you the expert now. So.
Yeah, until she comes on. So here's a little baby Xanthi. action.
And is that Bulgarian dress or Macedonian?
It's Macedonian.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
You look really happy.
Yeah, definitely really happy to probably have my mom be taking a photo of me when I'm like in a very hot costume. But so the way that Bulgarian music is conceived of and used in Western film scoring, I don't even want to say just Western because it's also very like popular in Japanese in anime, is very, I find it really fascinating, and I don't really know how to conceive of it. I have some quotes from John Powell of like what he was thinking of with regard to this, but also like what you said, kind of the intro that you gave, your cursory research that you did is pretty spot on in terms of where choral music kind of the place that it had, like women singing and it being basically associated with like agrarian work and sort of, I don't know, what you think of as folk activities. Like I think of like all the songs that I've sung in Greek are like things that are like, this is a song about sewing, or like this is a song about cooking for your family, or like, lamenting or having a good time or something, or, have a wedding or something like that. Like, it's music of life. It's the music that accompanies life events and life work. So, okay, the style of singing is, first of all, what I find really interesting is, and I have another clip I have a clip that's not from Solo that I want to play because I want listeners to kind of guess what this song is about. This is another instance of Bulgarian, like women's choir, basically. So here we go. And then we'll listen to Enfys Nest. Here, I'll put up a little bit of the score if you want to see. It's not great quality. But you can hear that kind of vocal quality, and this is like sort of
7/8 too. That's what I was really latching on to.
Yeah, that additive meter is like very common.
Bum, 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 bum. It sounds so familiar, but I'm not able to place it myself.
Yeah. So I will say that John Powell uses this. Obviously, well, actually, let's listen to the beginning of Marauders Arrive. So even though it's in 4/4,
the phrase lengths are slightly unpredictable. Yeah.
Exactly. And here's
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
So that's additive.
Definitely. Yeah. And so, first of all, yeah, I think I would agree that like, despite the choir part feels pretty, it feels pretty like in the tradition of what it is. The the way that it's like kind of westernized with the film, with the instruments is, it brings it into a new context. And so John Powell has stated that his intentions in composing the theme was to add in a novel, exotic voice to the film's soundtrack. He took inspiration from John Williams's choral writing in Phantom Menace, even though that's completely different. and he knew that, establishing the new choral sound while hearkening back to Williams' style. Knowing that the orchestration would be very aggressive, Powell brought in the Vanya Moneva Bulgarian choir for their particular sound, since they do not sing vibrato, and contribute a real aggression. So he has basically gone on the record saying that he did that because he wanted it to sound like a super aggressive, exotic thing. So
especially specifically like a ferociously feminine. That's the quote that I found of his. But yeah, like the seeking out an aggressive, fearsome, and alien sound.
Exactly, that's another thing that he has said. Like,
and to do that, we turn to non-mainline Western cultures. I mean, Bulgaria is still part of the West, broadly speaking, but it's exotified here, right? This is
for sure
still kind of Orientalism,
and it goes back all the way. And this happened. I guess this happened more so before I was born, but I just know it from like class and stuff. You know, I'm literally like, I looked at my class notes for this. I was like, I know I learned a lot about this.
You never know when they're going to come in handy. I never get rid of a notebook. Never.
Oh, it's so true. I'm like, we'll never. Yeah, same. I keep all of my class stuff. And I was so lucky for this class. Like for our weekly responses, we just had to like email them. So like in the body of emails is just like my responses. So it's perfect. I can just search my emails. It's just right there. So there was like kind of a revival of Balkan folk music in the 20th century. And it actually has like quite a bit of relationship to communism. And basically like during the rise of communism, which in Bulgaria, I guess would have been like in 1944, when the Bulgarian communists came to power. They basically, the music, new sort of rules started to govern music there. One of them was, expression of the common person, like the proletariat. And so that's kind of like when rural music and that kind of thing became really like part of the national identity, kind of like this folk type of stuff. And other types of music were like, basically there was like kind of a romanticizing of like this sort of agrarian music and this type of thing. At the same time, like Western classical music was seen as this very like the pinnacle of like Western civilization. So that's also when like they started to infuse more of their rural music with Western qualities. And that's why that's how we get like in that example that I played, we are hearing like a little bit of like Western polyphony. And choirs started to get more like some of the arrangements started becoming less focused on like the diaphonic, like drone based thing. And there started to be more Western harmony.
Yeah. And that's often the trajectory, isn't it? With sort of vernacular musics that get in one way or another, like propped up or institutionalized. Like you see it in gospel, you see it in all these sort of national folk trends where in more prestige venues, there's a degree of, I don't know, borrowing some of the procedures of art music that there's no value attached to it, but it is like a marker of like a certain kind of legitimization. So it doesn't surprise me that that's true of Bulgarian music, Bulgarian folk music.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in your experience, like, is that true what Powell said about the lack of vibrato? Is that how you would generate that sound?
Yeah, it is a lack. It's more of a like straight, like you can hear it really in Marauders Arrive. Like if we just... It's more throaty. Which is like, this is very different from like operatic type of...
Yeah.
And we also hear it in Star Wars Visions, if you remember the duel.
Oh, wow. Was that the same ensemble? Or
it wasn't, I don't think it was
evoking...
I don't think it was the same ensemble, but it was absolutely like 100% evoking the same tradition, and also Ghost in the Shell.
Yes, yeah. So this is not like solo does not have
It's not just solo. No.
You know what I remember, and when I heard this for the first time, I was like, I am back in Xena. The late '90s show, the theme
I
from
can't. Was
show
there this choir? Type of
Loduca.
thing?
Yeah, it's Bulgarian choir, and like the main theme, I don't know, it doesn't have quite this, diaphonic or semi-polyphonic treatment, I don't think, but it's the same vocal quality and aggression level, which, I mean, I can't reconstruct what Powell's exact process was, but I can imagine him thinking, like, I want this distinctive sound, and I vaguely remember the Xena warrior princesses having this idiom that would suit the character, the
or
group
like so
well.
many other things since then, because again, this is like definitely not just like a thing Powell just uniquely decided to do. It's like in itself is a trope in fact, he found the Vanya Moneva choir, which is the Bulgarian women's choir that he used for this. He found them because he was already in love with their sample library. Like there's already a sample library of Bulgarian women's.
Really?
There's actually a lot of like Bulgarian choir samples and sample libraries that you can kind of tweak the like vowels a little bit, and you can like
that explains so much, doesn't it?
And they were the ones who recorded the samples for that. So that's
I hope
how
they get hefty royalties every time, because
seriously.
the average Hollywood film score or television show or game that makes use of that timbre, I mean, it's not like it's explicitly honoring this long and highly developed choral tradition is being used as it is here. I mean, however well done and high-minded it was applied, is like it's being used as a splash of color to contrast with the overall sort of Western norm. So
I like that he didn't just use the sample library, though. I like that he actually hired.
No. I mean, he wouldn't.
Yeah, he wouldn't do that.
I would hope that he wouldn't dare. I think it's really great music. I mean, there's lots to unpack there, as you say, and who's to say whether it's ultimately like respectful or appropriate?
Yeah,
not me. I mean, but
I don't think anyone can really come down on that. It's just, it's more so the question it sparks for me is, what assumptions are people making of a culture based on how it is presented to us in a American package, which for some people, that might be all that they ever want to consider. For other people, it might be like, you can kind of you can understand it in both contexts, and it's easier to switch. So that's, I don't think any of these things are like bad. I just think it's interesting.
I think it comes up especially pointedly in these sorts of uses of various vocal musical traditions outside the West, and not just like Eastern European or Near Eastern cultures, but like Scandinavian or Chinese and Japanese, or pretty much every region has its own, often really idiosyncratic and ear-catching kind of approach to singing, and each one of these can serve without a whole lot of thought necessarily as a kind of blanket exotifying function in Hollywood, like the wailing woman trope, which we still hear, constantly. You think that it's the sort of shelf life would have expired by now, but nope. Nope. I don't know where I was going with that thought, but it's a big topic, isn't it?
The continuation of my thought is that clip that I played earlier, that was called Unmarried Man. And the point is just sort of that, like, when people hear the timbre and the style of Bulgarian singing, which, by the way, like in Bulgarian music, the major seconds are considered consonant. So the fact that like we hear something, like we interpret that as like badass, like female empowerment, like not afraid to use their full voice, like just like being really, I don't know, like raw and like wild woman and stuff like that. When that's sort of like, even their just like, I'm sewing clothes for my husband songs could sound like that too.
Right,
and so that's like, I guess we just lose sort of the shades of an entire culture's like humanity, or like when we hear their music and only think of that. It's kind of like when people play classical music and it doesn't matter if the piece is called like I'm dying, or if the piece is called like I'm pining for my love, or if the piece is like,
it's
Toloyan Spiegel's Merry Pranks. Like people be like, oh, that's soothing. Like it doesn't even matter what the shades are if you're not familiar with the idiom. Basically, it's just, it could all no musical style is immune to that kind of reductive way of listening. And I think ultimately we don't, I mean, we can inform like you and I are kind of doing right now, but listeners are going to listen, and commerce is going to work the way it does, and it takes work. It takes the work of real proponents or scholars of musical styles to actually reveal the complexity and that sort of actual human dimension to anyone who's not an insider, within a musical culture. Like one cannot fully appreciate it without a lot of work. Yeah. But back to the female empowerment thing in the, I think there was like, I'm sure a lot of listeners actually know this because I think this album won a Grammy and it was like actually very popular. I don't know what year it is, like 70s, 80s, maybe the 80s, like Mystery of the Bulgarian Voices.
87. That came up really quickly. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Were you familiar with that?
No, although I did listen to some of the tracks and was like, so this is probably where a lot of temp tracking was happening, or the inspiration for styles and usages that I am familiar with.
Yes.
Arose.
I even heard it sampled, or not sampled, like I heard one of the songs from the Bulgarian women's choir in the Lady Gaga documentary.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like it's really in so many places, places. So what started happening there was like after, like when there was that revitalization of rural, like folk traditions and everything, there also started to be this tradition of separating, like putting it on display, basically. Like having there be a divide between like audience and performer. So performer no longer necessarily invoking that in a context, but like doing it for stage. And obviously that like really intrigued me because, well, unknowingly that's also what I've been doing since I was 4. I literally go to competitions and put on a costume and like do Greek stuff. Like I didn't know that it came sort of like also from this. Well, it just, but
that is a theme that you see a lot in sort of world music performances, where you may have a master teacher from that region or that musical tradition teaching you the musical production or dancing often. But when you actually go to like the source, there isn't a strong distinction between performer and listener. And in fact, listeners are expected to contribute or be performing in some way. And it's not like you're putting on a show for a formal audience. Oftentimes, it might be considered rude if you're like, involved in a West African drumming performance and just sitting passively watching it. Like this divide is a very sort of Western centric kind of invention that we should not take for granted.
Well, I feel like this was also happening like in the context of, well, I guess it depends on where we're putting Bulgaria in the Western context, but also like it's a complex topic because in a lot of ways that has led to like the preservation of some of these things that maybe wouldn't have really survived to the same extent. At the same time, the decontextualization and then sort of like the emphasis on professionalism and like technique and like making it actually kind of makes, it's not even that one is artificial or something. It's like the art it's an evolution. Like it's just changed.
Yeah.
It's just changed. So basically in the 80s, the West kind of discovered them and then made them like really popular in the US. And so there were tours with like Bulgarian women's choirs, and it used to be, it was popular for a while. I think it was like, they used one of the Bulgarian choirs was like on a Kate Bush album, I think, and some other like in a Prince album. Like they were like really famous for a while. But like also the West wanted only the female choirs. They only wanted like, and so like the pretty people, and like it became like a whole thing. And then like they became popular, but then they like went out of fashion, and the feminist movement co-opted their voices as this like symbol of the strong women and whatever, when really it was like almost like they were really singing that kind of stuff to begin with, in the context of being like domestic workers. And
it says a lot more about the sort of average Western audience than it does about the singing tradition or the actual source of these styles. That's the association that a Western listener would sort of make stick to Bulgarian women's music, is that the only way that I can really conceive of this is as a fierce, strong sort of Amazonian warrior princess style of music, right? What does that say about you, if that's what you're hearing? Yeah.
I mean, it really reveals something about and to be clear, like I don't think it's at baseline necessarily a bad thing if like American women or something or people hear that and then feel like something inside of them is not as liberated. Even though they don't understand the context, it says like the way that we perceive things says more about like what we feel that we are like it says more about us, obviously, than the nature of other. We don't really understand the nature of anything outside of us, really. So the fact that Westerners find that empowering says a lot about the West.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But musically, I think I love this music, and the texture of the voice and the sort of dual, it's kind of like a, diaphonic type of thing. Like it's really common in Bulgarian music to have like either solo, like either monophony or like octave singing, or like a drone based polyphony where like basically someone stays on the same note or I think it's within like a perfect fourth range or a perfect fifth range or something.
Well, and that would be exactly what's happening here, because I don't think it ever exceeds an augmented fourth or diminished fifth. Yeah, I mean, I wonder if Powell was listening to some of these like popularized recordings or just had the sound in his ear. If he was actually seeking to do something that had some kind of authenticity to it. I mean, again, he is very forthcoming in his interviews, but that's not one particular detail that I found anywhere. Like,
me neither. But I mean, he definitely, like, another characteristic of this type of music is very narrow range melodies. And again, like it's literally like this John Powell's cues here really fall into that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
and we know that he can do very wide-ranging, expansive melodies, right? That's like most of the other themes in this film. Another way in which this pair of leitmotifs is so highly contrasting, right? And thus stands out is like melodic ambitus, right? The space that you're allowed to move around. Yeah.
Like, okay, so the narrow range melody, like listeners, is I mean like the melody doesn't, you could play it on a little baby keyboard that only has like 5 notes on it.
Yeah.
So basically like even especially this Enfys Nest 2, which is just it just, and then it goes a little bit down. But so you could really and it makes sense, like if you're singing in that like throaty style, it's not like it's harder to access your full vocal range if you're not moving between different like, I don't want to get too into vocal technique, but like you can't maintain that timbre for all notes, for like all the notes. You might have like a kind of a specific range where you can do that, or it's definitely not safe for your voice. It would hurt. So it really makes sense. yeah, it's
Well,
cool
props
stuff.
to John Powell and his orchestrators for making for nailing this sound, right? And I mean, in looking into this, I've learned more about Bulgarian music than I ever knew, which is not saying very much, but it inspires me to further develop my own sort of Star Wars musical teaching, which, like the class I'm doing right now, past few weeks has been, an introduction to mostly Western art musical traditions with a little bit of Hollywood film history too. But now I'm thinking, we could look at the Cantina Band and talk about Benny Goodman
Oh my gosh,
style
yeah.
jazz. We could look at this and get a little, a brief survey of a quite different musical tradition. That's the nice thing about Star Wars is that it can serve as an entryway into learning about a great many things because it is so eclectic, stylistically.
Absolutely. While we're on the topic, I'm going to play from Star Wars Visions.
Yes.
I think I'm on the right track. Again, it's the narrow vocal range.
Yep.
And the drone.
The seconds.
Yep. In here, I think it's done like really well too. And again, it represents that really badass like Sith that Lucy Liu voices. So it's kind of used in the same way. Yeah. But like, yeah. So there's another Star Wars example.
Wow. And I mean, it's just this wonderful collision of cultures too. I mean, you're getting some at the very end there, it sounded like a Japanese taiko drumming strike.
Yeah. I loved Visions, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of just, the most overt kind of Star Wars philosophy, artistically cobbled together from all sources, the best of all worlds and mush it together and bringing back the sort of samurai genre and bringing back what had informed but probably forgotten in a lot of people's minds, the original. It was very clever, very well done. And that, I just want to know who's singing that. Is that, from one of the sample libraries, or is this another Bulgarian choir? How did the composer learn that style?
It says chorus Tomoko Kanda. So I don't. Oh, so that must be the contractor. I think it was like recorded in Japan somewhere. Mm-hmm. I don't think they went to Bulgaria for that. But again, I think that style is also very common in anime. So
yeah, like you said, with the Ghost in the Shell, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's it's fascinating. It is fascinating.
What a great 5-minute span. I mean, I kind of picked this arbitrarily just because, I mean, I thought that this is a cool track, but I didn't realize that there's going to be so very much to talk about.
Yeah. I was like super excited the first time I heard the soundtrack. I was like, oh my gosh, wow.
and I would be remiss if I didn't note at the very ending, the last like 2 seconds.
Yes.
I don't know if this is just I don't want to intrude into the next slot, but
no, please.
It's the droids motif from Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, wait. Okay, wait. Is it at the end of it? Okay, let's okay.
Just
now we have to hear it. Okay, it says Enfys Nest with sound design on top.
Marauders, pirates, come to snake the score from under us.
Ready your harpoons.
Okay.
Move in.
We're just hearing this again because it's great. It's like such a distinct.
Yeah, really sounds folksy.
Yeah. It's so loud. Was that the Rebel fanfare? Wait, I could barely hear that. It's not. It was just like the first
Major
couple notes.
Trump. Yeah, I don't think it has a melodic profile, but the.
Yeah, okay. Just nicked one of my shoulders. It's nothing.
He's not okay.
interesting.
Oh, that was a quick change.
This is sort of like
This
desperate.
That's an ostinato we've heard before somewhere, right? Yeah, we've heard that before. Yeah. I think we heard that in maybe in Chewie in the surveying convex.
Yeah, I
convex
think
or
you might be
something?
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that might be an incidental. That might be an
Yes,
incidental
an
motif.
incidental.
But yeah.
Something
We've
like
totally
that.
heard that.
Maybe offer
We've totally
a
heard
note or
that.
two.
We've totally heard that. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay, continue. Okay, we'll continue. I have to say there's like the way that like the Bulgarian choir, the Enfys Nest parts,
Mhm.
like I like what the instruments add to it, which is it kind of keeps it grounded in the film score, in the score.
Mhm.
And there's like one particular like I don't know, it's not like it's set up. It's set up to the
Mhm.
drop. I don't know. It's not like a dominant chord, obviously, but maybe it is. It's something where like I like the note leading up to the one. I don't know how to describe
Mhm.
it. There's this one part though, where I like what Powell did there. All right. Little string thing. Little interlude. Definitely very John Williams.
Hang on, I got an uninvited guest.
You still with us, brother?
Yeah, okay. Just nicked one of my shoulders. It's nothing.
He's not okay.
It's this. I like that build up.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's
Do you know
very
what I'm
like
talking about?
explosion of the Death Star, right?
The rhythmically, I like it too.
It's a dominant, but a dominant of a different key than it ultimately resolves on. So it's like a 5 of
Oh.
F sharp, but then it goes to F natural.
Oh, is that why it sounds so cool?
Yeah, it's instead of, right, but that would be a little
Yeah.
bit too obvious. So
And
he
the-
modulates chromatically to F minor.
Is that like a hemiola that I'm hearing in the rhythm too?
Yeah, it's like da 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 da. Yeah, that's very
I love moments
Williams
like that.
/ Holst. You know, the sort of
Yeah, yeah,
big dramatic climax Holst chords type writing.
yeah. Hemiola just means like 2 beats against 3. Okay, basically. Okay,
You gotta uncouple this one on your own.
we're doing it again. Oh, maybe we already passed it.
I'm on it.
So Han's theme.
Val, keep your eyes open. We just tripped the sensor.
Wait, was that the droid's theme?
Yep. So
Wait, can you play the full thing?
yeah. Let's see. There's a couple different guises. It's mostly a sort of cheerful, rambunctious, slightly comedic
Yeah.
theme that's only heard in Empire Strikes Back. And like, it's a fairly prominent motif in that score. Like it
That's really funny.
occurs a number of times. Doesn't
No
get
Droid
recalled
Factory?
anywhere else. No. Oh no. There's one tiny little moment in Return of the Jedi that during the Ewok battle that almost a tiny bit sounds like the droid motif, but it makes no sense there. I think it's just Williams sounding like Williams. But yeah, so
Right.
the
Ewoks,
droid
Jawas,
motif-
droids.
Yep, they're all the same. Well, I mean, they're little, slightly comedic
Yeah.
alien type basically where Williams goes to Prokofiev for that kind of stuff. Yeah, so it was a totally ignored leitmotif outside the realm of a single movie, and I don't have confirmation, and maybe you can find some between now and the next recording session, but I think, I mean, Powell, in various interviews, he's like, yeah, people have not found all of the little Easter eggs and hidden thematic references that I buried in here. Like, I think
in the
there's one
movie?
in the movie, I think there's one for Princess Leia. I think there's one for the March of the Resistance, and I think this droid motif, and it makes sense because that's when the Viper droids show up, and like the melody is pretty specific. It's going like. He turns it into an action ostinato.
Oh my gosh!
But it's
Out of
such a
context,
strange...
it sounds so much like Prokofiev.
Yeah, it does. But it's so strange as a like action strings ostinato. I cannot help but think that this is his sort of bringing back to life in a evil variant the droid motif, this sad little droid motif that never saw any use outside Empire Strikes Back. It's like it works beautifully as an ostinato. It definitely maintains the pace and the sort of tone of the movie. But this is like a connoisseur level Easter egg. I don't. If it isn't, like, unless we're just hearing things, because I guess it's possible.
That's really funny. So wait, you said Princess Leia is one of them that he says that he has a nod to?
Oh no, that he hasn't said any of this stuff. He just like mentioned that they're like references to Williams's themes that are really hidden.
Oh my gosh.
I think the most obvious one is the
droids.
No, well, I don't
the Imperial Mark. They're the Imperial ostinato.
Yeah, like there's the March of the Resistance one on Savareen when
yes,
Enfys,
I heard. Yeah, I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, and I think the Princess Leia maybe just an interval or two, but in the build up to, but it's a pretty impressive interval, like that upwards major sixth. I think it shows up during the Lando's closet love scene. Which would make sense,
Okay.
So.
These Easter eggs are always. They're always yeah. They're interesting because when they're so this came up a lot when I was talking to Alex Ludwig for Dies Irae stuff, because some of these things are so like, all right, is it?
Well, but with Williams, I think, or Dies Irae, you can take it face value.
Right, but then there's like, let me ask you. Someone asked, because Camilla 2 episodes ago asked me point blank, did I hear any John Powell solo themes in the Book of Boba Fett? And I think we know why. I said no.
Who would?
And I think people are thinking of The Secrets.
Oh, The Secret. No. I am
right. Okay.
I think that's
explain your reasoning.
Yeah. Well, people were wildly speculating when the main theme for Book of Boba Fett, the sort of end credits music, came out slightly before the first episode of the show, and now I'm blanking on how it goes, but it's like it's a neighbor note figure, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then
it's
and
it's the minor, it's the third going down to the second back up from the scale. So I mean, it's just 2 notes, and the speculation was, so this is why I think I was vindicated in my very strong feeling that this is a sort of trivial similarity, is if that were to make sense as a reference, it would have something to do with Solo, and the Secrets theme in Solo is sort of Kira's secret, that she's part of the Crimson Dawn and becomes the leader. That's sort of, if you're gonna make a sort of one-to-one connection. So that's what people are thinking. That
Crimson Dawn would show up, Kira would show up.
Yeah, it didn't happen, and there's no reason to think that Goranson and company were thinking of that, because there's no corroboration for that theory. So yeah, I mean, she may well come up later, but that's not what they were thinking. It's kind of similar a similar thought process that people were involved with back when Force Awakens came out, and everyone was trying to extract everyone
Rey.
imaginable's theme out of Rey. And ultimately, okay, so it was confirmed that she was the Emperor's granddaughter. That was one of the theories, and people were hearing the Emperor's theme in there. I think that's very neat, and it's totally retroactively true, but it's not how Williams composed the theme, and right. I don't think that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, it can still be very personally meaningful to you. I mean,
absolutely,
these similarities are there, right? And they are. That's the stuff of Star Wars music. You're supposed to draw these connections, and they're supposed to be, deeply meaningful. But if I were to like come down the case of like objectively, did the composer intend that? Which is what I think the level of discussion was. I was like, sorry, no dice there.
Yeah. No, you mean chance cubes? No Han chance cubes.
Oh yeah, gotta say in your Watto voice though. Chance cubes.
Deja vu to our Last Jedi conversation, where we were basically like, you can read anything into race. It also Luke is in there too. Luke's exile theme is totally in there.
Heck,
the Force theme is
you
in there.
You can find the Star Trek theme in there if you wanted. I mean,
yeah.
Just takes a little ingenuity.
That's too funny. Okay, so glad to get your take on that. Yeah. And the Secrets motif is also not in this set of minutes, but we're at the end of the minutes now. What a cool set of minutes.
Yeah, really. Well, thank you for offering me this little segment, and
thanks for coming on the show for this great part.
I maintain this is a wonderful score. I don't know that I'd say it's underappreciated because
I think it's pretty appreciated.
The people who know it really love it. But I mean, the movie is unappreciated. So, and sometimes
I think
when
that's
you have a
why.
movie, when a movie is not like considered to be a masterpiece, people will not venerate the score generally. I mean, that happens with Star Wars, all sorts of Star Wars.
Well, that's how I
properties.
am. And that's honestly how I come to this score is I know it the least because it's, and the parts of the score that I don't love the whole score, but it's not like separately that I just don't like the score. It's like also a lot of the movie feels like iffy to me. So like the score comes with it. So it's hard to separate. Which is why I'm like really glad to have the opportunity to like go. It's been like so fun to have these to go through it 5 minutes at a time and like appreciate it in a new light at a slower pace rather than like just the whole thing. But I think you're right. Like the success of a score is often just tied to the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep. To my everlasting consternation when it comes to episode 9. I don't know if we'll ever talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
Man, what is in many ways Williams's swan song is now forever
marred.
Marred by the movie that it's attached to. Well, that my life's work,
Yeah. Although now Kenobi will come up, so.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So
another swan song.
Yeah, one more.
Gosh, are you gonna do a show for that?
I am having a crisis of faith right now. Or not a crisis of faith, a crisis of direction because I've been sticking to like wanting to do all of the shows. And like the format that I've been doing is that my friends and I have been live streaming after each episode, kind of like commentary with, people in chat and stuff. And Kenobi is so like, I am so excited for it, and also I'm so like overwhelmed by the fact that John Williams like that to me signifies that it's a big deal. Like Kenobi is a big deal to me, and for so many reasons I'm so excited for it that I almost want to sit this one out. I mean, I'd like to cover it later, but not like the week by week because I don't want to be part of the internet discourse about it.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I feel like so often there's this pressure to respond instantaneously. That's what happened when the trailer came out. It was like, oh, better get on Twitter.
I didn't watch the trailer.
You didn't? Oh.
I don't watch trailers because I don't like to.
Well, I'll hold my tongue there. I mean, it's interesting musically. It may have nothing to do with what actually happens.
Because trailers usually like piss me off. And also the trailer music, I tend not to like trailer music it tends to like make me it just gives me either false expectations or makes me go into something with a bad attitude or makes me judge something based on the trailer music, which has nothing to do with it, and then I get sucked into the discourse about it, and that's the worst part is getting like sucked into the Twitter discourse. That's and I don't like to be swayed. I'm impressionable. Okay, I try not to be impressionable, but you know, that's why I try to protect myself a little bit.
Well, fair enough. I'm also very hyped for this show and a little nervous, and I feel the overwhelming quality too. You know, people have such a short attention span that you want to capture at the moment of highest sort of cultural, you know, awareness or energy, but that doesn't always lead to the best analysis. Which is why it's so great to do things 5 minutes at a time.
I know.
For movies that came out 3 or 4 years ago. Yep.
Yeah.
Or more.
I feel lucky that I don't feel like I don't feel pressure to be like I can't take the anxiety of being the kind of quote unquote content creator that keeps up with the news and is like very on the minute. Like I like to have the time to like marinate in stuff and be like more thoughtful and like honest with.
Well.
Yeah.
Be careful not to go too far in the opposite direction, because then you become an academic and you'll be like thinking about writing a book for 6 years, but not actually put a page, you know, like put a word on the page.
Oh no, I'm already kind of there. That's kind of why I do. That's kind of why I do this podcast. It forces me to like get something out. Mm-hmm. But anyway, okay. Before I let you go, I must not. I've already asked you the Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire, but we're going to review your last answers. Tell me if you agree with your, or if you want to, and you can also have an opportunity to give new answers or expand and whatever. So this is what you said to question number 1 last time. So Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire. Question 1 is, in exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like? So do you want me to tell you what you said, or do you want to give just off the top of your head?
Okay. Maybe we can compare my because I don't remember.
Okay, okay.
See, what does Star Wars sound like? I think it sounds like music that
in 3 words.
Vaguely remembered music. Star Wars music sounds like vaguely remembered music from the past, right? So unless you're, you know, very familiar with the classical repertoire or the film music repertoire, you hear Star Wars, you think, you know, this sounds like music of my childhood or adventure serials or 1940s, you know, swashbuckling movies, without necessarily knowing the Corn Gold or the Nicholas Rose or whatever. So it's vague, it's tapping into the past in some way without you necessarily needing to know those intertextual reference. Was I close?
Not at all. Look, okay, so your 3 word. No, that's okay. It's these are all adding to your list of 3 word answers. Okay, so vaguely remembered music. Okay, this is what you said last time. You gave 2 answers. So your answer number 1 was dissonant pedal tones.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Your second answer was minor planing triads. Which you kind of talked about today.
Yeah. So 2 hyper-specific music, like compositional descriptions, and then 1 very vague, like cultural intertextual description.
It's hilarious. You were not. Yeah. Was I close?
Sorry.
No, it's fascinating. Okay. Now question number 2. And so you can answer first, and then I'll tell you what your old answer was. Yeah, what's something related to Star Wars music or sound that you are curious about and want to learn more about?
Well, that's easy. I want to know who the main composer for Kenobi is going to be. We don't know. I know. It's so like people are going nuts trying to figure it out.
Do you have any hopes?
Hopes. Let's see. I mean, I want to hear something new. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't think it needs to be. People have said because Williams is involved and that this is most closely tied to the main Skywalker saga of any of the sort of Disney properties outside the live action films, that it's got to have more of a classic sound. I'm not sure that it.
But who would that? Who would that even be? Who would you? Yeah.
I don't know. I really. It could be a lot of people. Something new, something that I haven't heard before. That would be nice.
Hearing John Powell talk about John Williams in interviews is very fascinating. There was like one quote in particular where he's like, you don't understand. Like, John Williams is he's like a composer he's not like a film composer. Like, he's like a composer, like with, all these other people. Like what he does is like, like the way that he talks about, like, he's like, so when doing the solo score, he was like, he tried to emulate the way that he just flows. Like a John Williams score just seems to like flow forward, unlike, and in his own words, unlike the rest of us film composers who pulse forward, which I think is a very interesting way of putting that, like the pulsing forward, which to me seems very like emblematic of just like the tools shifting. Like, I think it's, and the click track of the recording, and
like literally clicking a mouse versus drawing a
and also
pencil.
recording with a click track is like you play differently when you're like, I play differently when I'm on a metronome. So I thought that was like a really interesting quote from him. Okay, so last time you said, what we're musically in store for as Star Wars moves on to the next chapters of its development. So similar. And you said also, what was the actual score to episode 9 supposed to be before changes?
Still don't know that.
Yeah. Okay. The final question is, what's a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
Well, I think I remember I probably said Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
You did.
For that. Yeah.
Do you want to add another one?
All of them?
Not an easy question for you.
Yeah, another score.
What's one lately that you've liked?
Lately,
or not lately.
Oh, here's one. Severance, the Apple TV show, the score by Theodore Shapiro, which a student pointed this out to me, and then I sort of devoured the show on streaming, and it has this wonderful, I think, very knowing kind of referentiality to David Shire's score for The Conversation. The sort of chromatic piano.
I like that score. Really
great. And it's a sort of like paranoid, strange. It's very hard to summarize what's going on in this score, or in the show and the score. I get a little Bernard Herrmann in there too. It's quite different, really well done, and Shapiro's score for Severance. I
hate that it like increasingly sounds like I'll just have to get Apple Plus.
I know. This whole move to streaming was supposed to make it cheaper for us somehow.
I know. Cable cutting, cord cutting. Yeah. It wasn't the promise that I thought it was going to be. Anyway, so the themes that we heard in this episode were the gang, young Han Solo, heroic version, Enfys Nest 1, Enfys Nest 2, and the Imperials motif, and a little bit of the droids.
Yep. I argue.
Yeah. Frank would argue. And on the soundtrack, if you're following along on the regular edition, this is Train Heist and Marauders Arrive. Or on the deluxe edition, Deluxe Train Heist, which has the Q numbers, 2M15 through 16A BC. I think that's all for the stats of this set of minutes. Where can people find you online?
They can find me on Twitter at FM Lehman, and my webpage is franklehman.com.
Any new books you're working on?
Well, I got an edited volume that I'm the sole editor on of film music analysis. That's been a long time coming, but I hope this summer I can finally get it all sorted out and maybe hitting shelves sometime later this year.
Oh, wow.
Maybe. I mean, I've said that previous years, but it's almost there. And then I have big ideas, but
yeah, that sounds like me with albums. Like every year I'm like, there's 2 albums almost ready. Yeah, for sure.
You have them in you, right? Yeah. They just need to come out somehow.
Sometimes they're 70% done, but then like that last 30% is like, oh my God, that's the worst. And also you can check out his book, Hollywood Harmony.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, don't forget about that. You can find Star Wars Music Minute on all the places online. If you'll be at Star Wars Celebration, I'll be there on day one. That's it, because I got my ticket before the pandemic and there was only a day one ticket available. So my ticket transferred over. And so here we are. And wow, great episode. Yeah, with that, I guess thanks so much for coming back on. This is your third time. And thanks for introducing me to Samantha Tripp, who has already been on the show twice now. Yeah. We're all
the whole new generation of Star Wars music.
I love it.
Nuts.
I love it. All right. Well, see you all next week. May the Force be with you. Thanks for listening to Star Wars Music Minute.